Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem video. This is a postmortem of a game I played last night at the club. I was facing an opponent I've faced many times before, and he's slightly higher rated. For this tournament, our tournament ratings are, his rating is 1970 and mine is 1894, and he has a pretty good record against me. And one reason in particular I wanted to show this video is he's someone who always plays the English opening. So go ahead and put the first move on the board, and I played c5, the symmetrical response. So I didn't really realize the kind of opening that he was playing. But when I was doing research on the English opening for my series, I came across the Botvinnik system. And as I looked back over some of my old games, I mean, it sort of rang a bell with me when I saw that setup, and I looked up some of my old games with this opponent. And that's the kind of system that he always goes for. He goes for the Botvinnik system. So if you want, there is a video I did recently called The Botvinnik System in the English, where I go over a game Botvinnik versus Sherbakov, where so you can find that if you're interested. Just briefly, the Botvinnik system creates this pawn triangle with pawns on d3 and e4, and then a fianchetto, a kingside fianchetto of the bishop. So you get this little triangle here and this little triangle here, inverted. Fianchetto of the bishop, knights on e2 and c3, and that's the whole setup. And it's a very solid setup, and at the same time it's flexible. I mean, it's kind of fixed in the center with this pawn triangle, very hard to disrupt, and it allows play on either wing because White has ideas of breaking on the king side with the move f4, or expanding with f5 even, or he can also in some cases break on the queen side with the move b4, or expand on the queen side. So a flexible opening with a solid center allows for play on the wings. So I always got in some trouble playing against the Botvinnik system, so I had been looking for some kind of way to prevent him from entering the Botvinnik system. So he plays g3 here, and the idea I came up with was knight f6 to support an early d5 push, and that sort of discourages. Well, he can't play e4 immediately and start setting up that triangle. He's got to play a prep move like bishop g2, and then I can get in the move d5, and now if he goes for e4 at this point, I can just take it. So I have succeeded, I suppose, in preventing the Botvinnik system. Although if you look at this in the opening book, well, this is considered a way to play. Maybe not the best way to play, but it's a playable line for black. So he took, that's the main reply there. I take with the knight, and then he develops knight c3, going after my knight, and I play e6. And you can definitely question this move. I mean, I would probably still play this way because I want to get this pawn onto d5 if he exchanges. But there are other ways to play. There is just the retreat, knight to c7, and there's also the exchange, knight takes on c3. The disadvantage of this e6 move is that at the moment it blocks in this bishop, but I'm expecting at some point he's going to trade off my knight, and I will get a pawn on d5, and I'll get an open line for the bishop. So let's see how it goes. He plays knight c6 here. Sorry, he plays knight f3 here, and I play knight c6. Just normal development, castles. Bishop e7, preparing to castle, and now he decides to play knight takes d5, and I take back with the pawn. I could have considered taking with the queen here, and I did think about it during the game, but I want to keep this open line for my bishop, so that's why I take with the pawn, as well as it gives me a little more center influence. And now he can strike immediately with d4. Let me see if we back up a second. d4 was also an idea at some earlier point. I think here, instead of taking, he could have played d4 first and then took, but it gets to kind of a similar position. You will see. What we get after d4, oh, but there is a point to playing d4 earlier. If he plays d4 right here, I probably will take. I just moved my bishop and I don't want to move it again. He could take. And this is the point. He first grabs here and then takes. And we'll get a similar position to this as in the game, but my development is slightly better in the game, so somehow the sequence of moves worked out a little bit to my advantage. So when he played knight takes d5 first, I take back with the pawn. He plays d4. I just castle, so I've got an extra move in. I don't feel compelled to take this pawn. And he decides to take, giving me this isolated pawn. And so, if he were to put his knight here, I am actually preventing it. So somehow, if you compare this position to the previous one, I've got in a couple of extra moves of development. My bishop is a little more actively posted, although it's also a weakness there. It's not defended and it's a bit exposed. He can play queen c2, for example, right here to gain a tempo on the bishop. But my opponent plays here a move that's a bit unusual. He plays knight e1. And the idea is to just put more pressure on the d-pawn and also to reroute this knight. Knight from here to here also continues to add to the pressure on the d-pawn. So he's just piling up on this pawn. But the pawn is not blockaded, so I'm not sure if this is the most accurate strategy. So I mentioned queen c2 is a move here. And the chess engine, I was just checking the output, is giving pawn moves here. So this maybe is an interesting move, maybe not the best, but keeps some play in the position. Knight e1, going after the pawn, but the pawn is still defended at this moment. I should probably retreat the bishop here or bring a rook out. I defended the pawn in advance with the move bishop e6, and now he goes knight d3, gaining a tempo on my bishop. So moving the bishop out of the way in advance might have been a smart thing to do. And now he gets in this move, knight f4. And so I have to decide how to deal with this situation, and it's pretty interesting. The chess engine thinks I should just give up the pawn, play a move like queen e7, which is often the case with these isolated pawn positions, especially if you get some counter pressure on these pawns. But in this case, this pawn is not weak, and this pawn is adequately defended. Although after the exchange, the knight's no longer going to be defending the pawn, but the queen still would be. So he can grab a pawn here, and after bishop takes, I can try and get some pressure on the bishop, try and pin it, but he's got the move e4. And so I guess after knight b4, it looks like I get some counterattack. So maybe I win the pawn back in some line, or I force it into an isolated pawn that I can attack, and I pick up this strong bishop. So overall, the engine gives this as only a slight advantage to white, not anything more than a typical opening advantage. So it's interesting, you can just give up the pawn in these cases and still have a decent game. I played knight e7, just trying to hold on to the pawn for a little bit. But that introduces some issues, because I always had in the back of my mind the idea I would push this pawn forward if I got into trouble. But now this pawn is hanging over here on b7, if I ever push the d-pawn forward. So I had to start worrying about that. He played the move b3, a good move, top engine choice. He's going to develop this bishop. I go queen to d7, so I can bring some rooks, well, connecting my rooks and bringing them to the center. Plays bishop b2. I go rook a to c8. And he plays the move queen d2. And already I was starting to wonder if maybe I have some tactics here. Basically, I'm playing with the isolated pawn. I've managed to avoid the Botvinnik system, but I have accepted an isolated pawn in consequence. And I don't mind that. I've played a lot of positions with isolated pawns or against them. And when you have the isolated pawn, you want to get piece activity. That's what you're looking for. You have a little more space, and you want to get active with your pieces. So already I was thinking about ideas like rook here, bishop here, and rook there, coordinating on the c2 square. He plays rook f to d8, so he doesn't immediately... Oh, he played queen d2. It's my move. Yeah, I guess I felt it wasn't safe to play bishop f5 here, although the engine thinks I can. I guess it's kind of a pawn sack. I was playing this move rook fd8 as a way of preparing this bishop f4 move and rook to c2, but bishop f5, rook c2. But he stops this by making a threat here. Now he's attacking on g7 there, and I need to do something about it. But it turns out I have a decent response here. So this move here was a bit of a mistake. If we stop at this point, White's edge has been slowly increasing through these past few moves. It's now about 0.5, 0.6 in that range. So the engine thinks White is doing well here. So I haven't quite been playing the best moves. I think this move here, bishop e6, instead of just developing a rook, was maybe a mistake. And he's played well and got two active pieces here. But knight h5 is a bit of an adventure that doesn't have a great outcome, because I can play d4 and shut down the bishop, and now the position is much closer to even. And he plays immediately rook a c1. So he's contesting the c file, and that takes away my idea some kind of tactic on c2 for the moment. But now this knight is a bit loose out here, and I go after it with bishop to g4. And he has nothing better to do than to retreat the knight. And then I wasn't sure my bishop was doing a whole lot here, although it does put some pressure on this e-pawn. He can always move it forward, and it's adequately defended at the moment. And I thought, well, maybe this is a more active square for the bishop, so I placed it here. He continues with rook fd1, so very logical play, continuing to the center. And now I make kind of a mistake, although it worked out okay. It's one of those moves, knight c6. I'm just overprotecting this pawn so that my pieces are a little freer to move. And the second idea of this move is that it blocks the bishop's view of the b7 pawn, so now my queen is free to move around without hanging a pawn. So it had a couple good ideas in it, and I thought about all the various exchanges, and as I calculated them, they all worked out okay. What I missed was the move knight d5, a very interesting move. And if you think about it, when the knight's on e2, this square is perfectly well guarded, so his knight can't drop in there. But when I move my knight to c6, it's a weakness of the last move, as King's Crusher likes to say. I've just given up this square. I was thinking about all the good things this move does for me, and I forgot to think about the things that it does, the good things it does for my opponent. So we can drop the knight into d5. Pretty annoying move, because now this pawn is just hanging. He can grab the bishop, it looks like, and win the pawn. But it turns out things are not quite that simple. But I need to play the right move here. So actually, this is a good point. If you want to pause the video and think about what you would play as black, there's really one move that's better than all the other moves here for black. Okay, I played the move queen to e6. So what's the idea? The idea is I'm putting pressure on the knight here, so it's got to do something. Can't just hang around there. Because I will, if the knight's not moved, I'll just take it with the rook and win two pieces for the rook. So that'll be good for me. Even if I lose the pawn, it'll still be good for me. So the knight is sort of forced to take the bishop. And then after I take with the pawn, you might think that White can take the knight. I take back and then grab this pawn over here because it's no longer defended. But that doesn't work. And so this is the point of the move queen e6, is I can force that exchange and still hold on to my pawn. So if you want to pause the video and think about what might happen after that, this is a good little tactical exercise. Okay, let's give away the answer. If he were to grab the knight, I would take back with the pawn. It's very important to take with the pawn and not the rook. And now if he grabs here, I can push the pawn forward and just win that piece. So that's the trick. It's bringing the pawn to the c-file and using that to indirectly defend this pawn against being taken by the threat of pinning the bishop. to the queen. So this just barely holds together. He plays one of the best moves in the position. The top engine choices here are e3 and e4, which is interesting because if you've got this isolated pawn position and you have a chance to dissolve it, usually that's good for the side with the isolated pawn because you've got all your pieces active at this point. But apparently I've managed to develop enough pressure that he doesn't really have much of a choice. So he played e4, and I went ahead and grabbed it, and he took back with the queen. And so this sequence pretty much takes us into the endgame, and it's an endgame where both sides have some weaknesses, and white has the bishop pair, but it's probably not enough to win. Still an edge to white, so white has maintained an edge throughout this whole game. The edge decreased or increased at times, but he always had some edge. So I decided to trade off a pair of rooks first. Yeah, it's about the same. The engine at first thought maybe taking the queen immediately was the better idea. But anyway, this was my idea. I trade off these pieces. I create a weak pawn here. Obviously I have these weaknesses, and white has the bishop pair. So we're in for an endgame, and it's my turn to move. And I'm very much aware, and actually in the preceding section, I also had to be aware of threats on the back rank. My king, if I ever lift this rook, the king has no escape square. So I played this move h6 just to give my king a square to run to, and I didn't want to play g6 because the bishop is already controlling all of those squares. So he seizes this opportunity to get active with his rook to d5. Kicking my bishop, so I place it here. Notice the bishop is controlling the entry square. He would really like to play rook to d7, but I don't want to allow that. I want to control these squares. So he decides to go after my pawn with rook to b5. And maybe this is not the most accurate move. The engine likes knight a7 here and rates this as about knight a7 and rates it as about even. I don't quite understand that. After knight a7, can't he just take this pawn? And then rook c2. Okay, can't he take another pawn? Well, he's got to move the bishop here. I guess the bishop gets kicked around in this line. Okay, well, let's show what happened. I didn't have this knight a7 idea, but I realized the key to the endgame here was getting my rook active, and I played rook d8. And now I have some threats. The rook can come here with check. If the king comes up, it's check, and I take this bishop. If he blocks with the bishop, then I can bring my bishop in and win the pinned bishop. So he's got to respond to that. The engine likes the move bishop f3 as the best response here, keeping a slight edge to white. Notice this blocks my access to the back rank, so I can't check and take the bishop. But I can come here immediately. This was my idea. Rook to d2. Bishop c3, and I can grab over here on this pawn, and now he can grab this pawn, and rook to c2, hitting the bishop, bishop d4, and well, we'll get to kind of a similar position. I can now take the bishop on d4, eliminating his bishop pair advantage, and have time to come back and, well, no, it looks like he's going to win this pawn. So we'll get into kind of a similar situation in the game. Let's check out how it actually went. In this position, he played a move that was also on the engine's list as the second choice, bishop to d4. So that prevents my rook from getting into his back rank. But now I can trade off the bishop here. And I think that's forced. If we back up a second. Yeah, I don't have any good move other than taking that. He's just attacking my pawns over here, and I'm going to be in trouble if I don't get rid of these guys. But I can pick up a pawn immediately, and then he gets a pawn. And then I can go for the check. King to f2, check again. And now notice he cannot play the move king to f3, which he might like to play, get his king active, because I have the move bishop to here, check, bishop to d5, check. And that would win the bishop. So he's got to go back, and so that's a key point. Even though he's going to have an extra pawn over here, which is passed at the end of all this. I take here, he takes here. But a key point is I've managed to keep his king confined. So material is even, his king is confined, but he has the passed pawn. And if I play precisely, I actually have an advantage here. But I have to play the correct move. And that move is king f8. I've got to get my king into the game immediately. At this point, I first thought I had a tactic. I thought I was going to grab the bishop. King takes rook, and then bishop here check, forks the king and the rook, and I would pick up a whole piece. But I realized in time that after I take the bishop, he can play rook here check, getting out of the fork. I move my king, and then he can take my rook, and I've just lost a piece, lost the exchange. It'll be a rook and a pawn. Well, a rook against a bishop, and he'll have this passed pawn, and he'll be winning. So that's a tactical way to lose, taking the bishop. So I have to play carefully. Now the move here is king f8. Just getting my king over here and trying to harass this pawn, and taking advantage of the fact that his king is confined. I played something different. I put my rook behind the pawn immediately, and now that it also might be drawn. Just I don't want to give the false impression that I had a win here. If I go king f8, there's a slight edge to black, and it's a chance to play for a win. After this move, it's all just completely drawn. So that was my best try, but probably also drawn. I play rook b2. He gives me the check and forces my king further away. That's the key point here, whereas a check otherwise would have driven me closer. So it takes me a while. He starts pushing this pawn. I push g6. I plan to come out on the dark squares to avoid his bishop from giving me checks. And also notice he cannot advance his pawn. If he goes to this square, I'm going to deliver the check here and pick up the pawn. So he doesn't want to lose that pawn. So instead he plays king to g1. So that was why when he was first checked, it would have been more accurate to go to g1 directly rather than going to f1, eliminating some of those tactical possibilities. Here I play bishop c4, trying to slow down the pawn. And he goes bishop to... oh, no, he didn't play that first. He played h4 first. And I play h5. I decide to try and slow down the advance of these pawns. The engine thinks I could just start moving my king over with king g7 now, and that might be the best try once again. But I played this move. And now he went bishop c6. So now he's supporting this pawn, advancing all the way. And I didn't like it. I thought if I tried to run with my king, let's examine this possibility, because this is what I was thinking about during the game. If I come with the king, this is what I initially intended to play. He pushes. I come here with the king. He pushes. And now I need to stop the pawn. If I keep coming forward, he's got this check. I was a little bit worried about this. King here pushes the pawn forward. Maybe this is okay. I can win the bishop. He gets the queen. I take it. He gets a rook. So it's a rook against a bishop and a pawn. This is also still probably drawn. But the game would go on much longer. So I didn't particularly like that. So at this point, instead of playing king g7, I came up with another idea. And I played the move f6. And you'll see the idea in a minute. He's going to push on with the pawn. This is how the game went. I played g5, getting some counter pressure against these pawns. Pushes on with b6. Now I'm forced to bring my bishop over here to stop him from queening. This is my last chance to really take it and sacrifice the bishop for the pawn. He places his pawn here, and I just take it. And now the idea is, if he takes with the bishop, then I just move my king to a dark square, and I have to escape from any checks of the bishop, and I'm going to threaten to come over here and win the bishop. And this, the engine evaluates as about even once again. Let's see. I'm interested in this. King f1. Let's see. I was going to move this pawn forward, but that might be a mistake. Let's say I take first. He takes, and I push the pawn forward. He keeps marching. I march over on the dark squares. He comes over towards my rook. I come over here. It's kind of a race. He goes here, and I can come all the way up to here, keeping the pin. There is a tactic here. He can play rook h8, and when I win the try and win the bishop, okay, so I can't actually play this way. Let's back up and see. So the tactic is rook h8, then rook here check, with the skewer winning my rook. So so far so good. After king e1, I have to play rook b1 check, or rook b4. Let's say I place the rook all the way up here. King d2. I only have rook moves. Seems I need to keep this if he ever gives up his rook, this is a draw again. Oh, bishop to g5 check. That's a clever trick. I have to watch out for that kind of stuff. But this is still a draw. Okay, we'll get to this kind of draw in the game. So I guess there's no real winning chances. Anyway, he took, and instead of taking with the bishop here, he took with the rook, which is a more logical way to play. You don't want to get your bishop into that pin where I might be able to exploit it, although it turns out I couldn't. He always had tactical resources there. So I took the rooks off, and then I took the pawn over here, and then I offered a draw here, which he accepted. And the reason this is a draw is because this is the wrong color square for the bishop. He's got a light colored bishop, and it's a dark square in the corner. So I don't really need to do anything here. He can only win with his pawn. He can't save his pawn from being taken except by taking my pawn. If he pushes forward or tries to defend it, I just take the pawn. So he's got to grab here, and now he's got a rook pawn. And no matter what he does, oh, it's my move. I just sit in the corner here. And it doesn't matter. He can never force me out of this. I don't. It is important to give away my pawns. He's got to take these pawns to try and create a draw. It's important for me to get rid of those pawns to try and create a draw, because it has to do with the stalemate here. And that's a draw. The king has no moves. So there's just no way out. He can't force my king out of the corner because the bishop is the wrong color. So anyway, if we back up, after I took, he took, I took, he took, and I took the pawn, and then I offered a draw here, and he looked at it for a second and accepted because he realized right away it was the wrong color rook pawn situation. And he figured I knew how to play that. So anyway, I was happy to get a draw against a higher rated player with the black pieces. I had the black pieces, so always a tough opponent for me. And I thought there was some interesting tactics there, and some interesting strategy as well. And fit in with the theme of the English opening, since I'm covering that in my opening basics. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.